I don't know. I have some thoughts, some things to look at. This is sort of my exploration, but it's fun to share my exploration because even though I'm good at this, I'm always learning something new, and I appreciate the chance to do it. Um, so I posted in the community something about this, about testing data as it's coming in, and I wanted to just explore that further and see if I want to put this into the dev environment as a standard thing. Again, I every time I think about that, I worry that I'm going to get too complex for someone who is just getting into this. So I don't really want to do it, but I don't know. I think it's I think if I make it clear, like I did in this post, hopefully you saw this and read it, if I'm testing data, that this is a good thing for a beginner JS and FMer to understand. Hey Joseph, welcome. Good to see you. Um, the fact that we should really test our data as it comes in to make sure that it's going to work. Do you all agree that that's a good thing to do?
Yes.
Yes. I FileMaker makes it easy to not test things. We just pass data around scripts and stuff without a care in the world. Um, because it's kind of the last thing we do. We usually write scripts to make sure they work and they do what they're supposed to do. But and I learned this from Wim. Rarely do we go back and find the places that there it's not so that it could fail and then try to fix that. So I don't know. I We'll see how this goes. Try catch is an interesting idea. Um, Josh Willing has advocated for many years for us to have it in FileMaker so that the idea is that when you put this block of code in your system, it's going in your FileMaker, in your JavaScript, it's going to run this try block first. And if that has any error, it's going to catch the error and it's going to do something else. So I think what this is useful for is try your data as it comes in, make sure that it's actual data that you can use inside of your library. If it is, great. If it's not, let the user know that something happened with the data. This will help us to debug better. We won't get those errors, and the user, I guess, in the web viewer won't see just a blank screen with nothing happening. So I think there's a lot of merit for this. I don't know I don't know the full like use of it yet. So I thought we would just work on it together and see what we have to say. So this is just a basic template that I have. I'll use some vibe coding, I think, in this, but I want to try to learn it myself here. Although as I was thinking about this topic, I was like, maybe let me just ask the agent to develop it for me and then explain it to me and call it a day. But I think I'll go old school and like learn it myself. So our typical setup, window.load widget is called by FileMaker. It will pass in some data, and we'll just go ahead and const object equals JSON parse JSON. Now, I think this is how I would do it, and I would say const data equals object dot data, and then I would do something with that data. Um, Actually, let's use some vibe coding there because I think that could actually help me um, take the results. Well, no, I'm not. I'm going to wait on that. I'm not sure what I want to do with it. All right, so let's figure out if we could put this into a try catch. So the idea of a try catch is to make sure that we have data first. So, um, so we're gonna try. Let's put all this in a try. So try And let's see what actually GitHub is telling me. Then we might update it here. So we're gonna try to parse it. We're gonna try to stringify it. And if there's an error in any of this code, if it can't parse the data that came in, then immediately it's gonna jump down to this stuff right here, and it's going to alert me to it. So that's kind of nice that we want to make sure the data is coming in all the time. So if I run this, I get the data in a large thingy here, a large dialog, which I can't, oh shoot, I can't dismiss. There we go.
Okay.
Let's not do that. Okay. So now we know that it works. So if I were to come back to Java to FileMaker and just remove the data variable, let's see what it does there. Okay, with some data. So it did do that correctly. What if I just removed the JSON entirely? There we go. So this is actually really nice because I'm seeing it can't parse, nothing came in. And the we can always look in the console and we can see that the errors are happening, but it's nice to actually have it try my data and then purposely catch the error and do something with that. So let me think about what could I do. Let's
Jeremy, can I just add one quick thought here
yeah,
as well?
yeah,
Like, a try block is kind of like a get last error trap.
yeah,
And then if there is an error, exit script. And that's one of the real powers of it is that it any code below it just doesn't get executed. Whereas if you don't use a try and you get an error, it might flag the error, you could console log the error, but it'll keep going. It'll just keep doing the rest of the crap. And now you're in a context where you're going to get unexpected results because a necessary variable is all figured up, right? So that's where I think try is really critical is you need to exit out of this process if this is buggered up. Don't continue on, or it's going to muck with my code, or it's just not going to work, or whatever it is. Does that make sense?
yeah. Now it looks like if it looks like you said get last error. So if it errors out on this very first line, it's not going to even run the next two lines. It'll
Correct.
just jump right to the catch. So
Correct.
it's kind of a get last error, but it's also a let's get out of here on the first error that I encounter,
Yeah. In,
right?
in FileMaker, it's like every line has a get last error after every line almost, right?
Yeah.
Like FileMaker doesn't really have a try function. Well, it does. I guess if you use transactions, it kind of runs a similar way. Um, but
So now
yeah,
let's see. So let's run this. Now the sucky thing is all of my, there we go. Okay, so now I'm cleared out of my with all my errors. And I'm gonna see if, all right, what's happening here? Oh, that's why, because I have an error up here. Ha ha ha. See, I have all sorts of errors. I should have put this in the try block. So now I can run it and it's calling FileMaker data. It's correct. It was able to parse it. There aren't any errors, and now I can do something with it. Let's go ahead and build a catch here. So we'll do this. I'm going to try to do this const table equals document.query selector table. And then I'm going to say table dot inner HTML equals there was an error parsing the data. And just do that. All right. So let's go back and remove the eight. Hey, Gabe, good to see you. All right. Null is not an object. Let's see. Table. Um, document dot. I'm just going to do get. Did I save it? Oh, that's why. Maybe I didn't save it. No,
yeah,
div
it's not
ID.
saved. No, well, index isn't saved right now.
There we go. Oops, hold on. I don't use query selector as often, so I forget it's going to select the
Yeah,
first
this
element.
this was completely throwing me what you were doing here. I'm like, oh, this is JavaScript. This isn't React.
There we go. So document.query selector, I'm going to grab the div with an ID of table and I'm going to parse into it. I'm going to put into it, there was an error. So the user isn't seeing just a blank thing. They're seeing, okay, I do see it. So actually, let's pull this up to the top. I'm going to put that to the top because well, actually, that should kind of be in the try as well. Because it could be invisible or it could be not there, but then it's not accessible there.
If it's in the try, it may not be available to the catch unless you
Did you all
define
notice that?
table.
So yeah, so the table, I'm trying to grab it in here. I'm trying to get the div elements where the ID is table, but it's now grayed out and it says it's declared it, but it's never read, even though I try to use it down here. So
So
that's
how would you
interesting.
solve that with if you wanted to do that? How would you make table available
Put it
Well, I would put
inside
it
in
try
both?
catch.
If you put it before let table and then update the table inside the try, it's
oh,
the
good
scope of
idea.
Yeah,
the variable, isn't it?
Let's do that.
yeah. You
Okay.
gotta you gotta you gotta let the table. Yeah.
Now we'll put that in here. Table equals document.query selector table. Great. So again, if it this doesn't exist, well, if it doesn't exist, then this is going to have a problem. So at some point, do I just assume that I know I have it in there? I don't know. I guess I could create the element. There's a lot of things I could do. Anyway, let's just stick with this. We're going to go surface level. All right. So that is going to work. Great. It's going to set it with that. Otherwise, I like the console logs in there. I like that they put them in there. And I actually I keep forgetting about this, but we do have a console.error in
Yeah.
our console that I forget about.
Console.warn as well, which is usually an
Yeah.
amber rather than red.
Okay, so in the console, this is an error, but if I do console.warn,
Warn, yeah.
Yeah.
oh, I get it yellow here. That's interesting. My
That's from
extension.
Ninja.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you use that, Marcus?
Yeah, you demoing it here, I put it in right away and then I forgot why I put it in. And I was seeing all this stuff in my code. I'm like, where is this coming? And then you demoed it again. I'm like, oh, that's Ninja. Okay, cool.
I love it because I can hover over it, I can pin
Yeah.
it, I can copy
Yeah.
it. It's just, I don't know how I could live without this. Like, this is so great.
I
Okay.
was having a massive infinite loop. I couldn't find it in my code, and I just let the infinite loop run, and I just visually went through all of my files until I found the line that Ninja was saying, "You're at 6,000 calls on this line." I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to narrow it down. So
Let's just do, I forget how to do this. I did this in, uh, we'll just do data colon zero dot, we'll just do that. We'll just do it all. Okay. So error. So obviously I wouldn't do this. I might run a FileMaker script. I might maybe ask FileMaker to go try to fetch the data again. There's a lot of things I could do with that error, with handling the error. But if I did it correctly, then I get undefined. So that's great. Let me,
but did that was that the tribe? No, interesting. The try block didn't trigger there. You got your alert.
yeah, well, it's right here. So, oh, I see why I'm doing that. This is how I'm supposed to do it. Object const data equals object.data. There we go. Okay. So there we go. So now I have the object and I can do, now I'm going to use some AI. This is an object. Make it appear as a indented, formatted object in the div. There we go. Okay. So what it's doing is it's adding a inside of the table div, it's adding another div called pre, which we talked about before. There we go. So now I can do something with it. And this could get really long. This whole try thing would get really long. So I may want to extract this out into a function and write the function somewhere else and let me write all those lines somewhere else and then just call that one function here. But yeah,
And
that's really nice. Yeah.
you can base that catch on anything, huh? Like you could set another flag in there if you didn't necessarily even want it to be an error, but you just wanted it to, I don't know, some workflow you
No,
had.
the try is my understanding, and Gabe probably knows this better. Try only triggers the catch on an error, but what you pass into the catch could be other
Okay,
things than the error. But the error
that makes sense.
is what's getting passed into the catch right now.
Okay, that's a
Am
parameter,
I understanding that
not a
right?
trigger.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you do a commit and you do like a get last error in FileMaker, where
I
the
said
the
that.
error the error is like unable to write, undefined is not an object, blah blah blah, any of those. So, but it's basically anything other than zero error, no error code will skip the catch. That's the kind of part of the try. And the other nice thing about try and catch is it doesn't stop execution at that point. The rest, because normally if JavaScript gets to a unhandled execution, you try and read a set a property or something that you can't set, then the rest of it, the rest of the code just stops running because it's hit a terminal error. Whereas try and catch is like a graceful way to do something where the results are non-deterministic. Like if you're requesting data or you're doing something, you can then handle that, log a warning or an error, or do something and then continue with the rest of the application.
We we have a finally block. Okay, so let's go back to something
Right.
because this
Yeah.
this is interesting because we can catch and in the catch parentheses we can so this error is this error becomes a variable um that is an object, but it looks like we can deconstruct the object and we can say what was it, name and message. So name and message, I'll just do name and message. I'll let it, it's probably not going to change anything because that's, oops, I need to shut off the, I can't, my error is that I am not getting an error. Okay. So let's see, what's the actual name? Let's just try the name. Oh, interesting. So now I got an error down here. We'll just comment that out. And we'll just get rid of the message and just see what the name looks like. I think the name is like the actual JavaScript name for the error, syntax error. So in this case, I'm trying to parse something and I can't parse anything, and that is a syntax error. If I had there's other errors like a type of error, which I see in here is a possibility, a type error. So if I'm testing something that comes in and I say it's a it's a it's a string and I'm trying to use an object where a number is necessary, then I'm going to get a type error. So this is interesting. So looking at this, I don't know if this becomes a little bit confusing. I think it probably is worth teaching FileMaker developers as a next step. But I think also that like I think one of us said, it makes very significant, it makes very clear what the error is. And it helps us to at least display something that we know is the wrong thing. So that's interesting. Um,
It's
what's yeah,
it's also a good defensive way to program to be able to,
yeah,
rather than just assuming everything is all, because we ran it once, we didn't get any errors. There are, situations where a certain type of data comes back and we haven't accounted for that, so it is useful to use this as a methodology.
finally does finally
I
have
don't
any
think you can pass something into finally.
finally nope. Okay, obviously not because that's
Finally
the
just
error.
runs after basically if the try. I think if the try succeeds, then it will run then the finally afterwards.
Yeah, it says that the finally block, let's see, contain contains statements to execute after the try block and catch blocks, but before the statements following the try catch finally. Control flow will always enter the finally block, which can proceed in one of the following ways: immediately after the try block, which finishes execution normally, immediately after the catch block, and immediately before the execution of the control flow. Uh, anyway, okay. Oh, these
I
are
think it also depends because I think the try and the catcher functions you can do like return false and stuff like that to be able to exit out of the the thing, and this is inside of them called. So effectively, it allows you to say try and do something. If there was an issue, do this, and then but if it was successful, then continue. Call some other function or do something.
so this might be interesting. Uh,
You have to obviously in your head when you read finally, you have to say it but in a passive aggressive voice in your head. Finally.
Finally.
return. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a function here. I don't know if this will work. So we're going to call this returned. Let's do proper data, and we'll say blah 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 blah. We'll say
You
just
need to let the table.
yep. I'll bring that down here in a sec.
Okay.
So we'll just do proper data. Well, yeah, I need to do this. I'm just proper data equals data. That's stupid, but I'll just do that, and we'll return proper data. So I'm trying to build and I don't know if this is going to work. Something is wrong here. Equals. There we go. So const, this function here, this function is going to test the data. Okay, hold on. This is wrong. I don't want to do it this way. All I want this to do is
Do you want to move the try back into the window, but have a function that you call within the try block?
well, what I was trying to do is build just a generic function that will allow me to test the data, and then if the data is good, pass it back to the main function, return it to the main function. So my try is out of this, but what I would do is const proper or result equals test data from bring that in, and now but what I need to do in this case is I need to pass the error back. I'm making a mess of this, and I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to just do this. Let's do this. Let's do return. Let's do results. There we go. And we'll say result equals data, because if the data gets processed properly, then that's great.
Then you don't need the table. Yeah, you don't need that one there, right?
And then I'll do results equals error, and I'll return the results. So I think I could put this, I could put this inside of the finally, but I don't really need the finally because I'm either returning the proper data or I'm returning the error. And now so we can do if.
Do you even need to return at 31?
No, because what happens there is the result gets set inside of the try. If that fails, you then override the reference to result because you're then saying result equals error. So that's a subtle difference between if you put it in the finally block or if you put it as the code afterwards, because the bit afterwards will run anyway that says return and then the value, whereas if you put it in the finally block, then that bit only runs if the test was successful, because what you're trying to do is fetch the data. If it does work, if there was an error, then just return the error and not whatever it was that came back. But then if there was data, return just that data.
There's nothing returned though. So what I tried to do was test data from FM JSON and pass the JSON in. The error is happening because I'm not sending any data in, but nothing is returned. So I do have to return something.
Yeah, result.
Yeah, okay. There we go. So now
Right, but you could put that return on line 30 inside the try catch.
it is on line 30.
Yeah, but you could put it at line 27.
But then the function would only return the value if there was an error.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to
Yeah.
return both because I want to handle it
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah.
Now, returning the error doesn't make sense. So I'm gonna return, I'll just say return result equals error. I'm gonna use the actual word error. I don't care what kind of error it is, I don't
Could you
think.
you could return error dot message.
Yeah, but okay, let's try that. Let's see what that returns. Error parsing JSON. So the problem is that I don't want to, all I want to do is return the generic word error so that
Right.
I can handle it up here. So I'll say if results equals error, there we go. So it remembers what I was trying to do. So if result equals error, then do this. Otherwise, do this. So I'm not sure that I don't know if this is better. I mean, because I'm starting to get, I like the fact that it's
That that's not going to work because name isn't defined because you didn't return error. You
oh right here.
returned the
Yeah.
word error.
Okay. So I'll just
You
say
didn't
there
you
was an
didn't
error
actually
parsing
return
the
the
data.
error block.
There we go. I'm not gonna worry about that. I'm just gonna worry about
Yeah.
testing the data. If the word error comes back, if the string error comes back, then do this, else do this. Still an error. Okay. What am I doing wrong? That's correct.
Null
Result.
is not an object.
What is null? Oh, oh, stupid, stupid chat GPT. It's changing my, or it's having a bunch of divs that, I mean, that's probably the better way to go. I should have a div ID equals error so that I can post the error in a specific place. What am I doing? There we go. Okay. So that's what it did. It was trying to stick
Mm.
the error inside of the error. There we go. Okay. So let's run this. Okay. So there's an error parsing the data. That's great. Now let's go back to FileMaker, run, let the data come in. Beautiful. Okay. So now it's just bringing it all in. That's great. Okay. So I like this. I think I like this. I don't know. I like to be able to test it. This is how, I don't know. Does anybody have any opinions on this? Is it getting too complex for
I
someone
think
who's
probably the only reason to break it out would be to if you've got different multiple things calling it. If you've got two different or more than one thing calling it. If you've only got one, then there's no point abstracting it into another function, is there?
sure?
It would make sense just to have that code in line. But if you've got a widget that calls different stuff, and then you've got a standardized way to check that and then display errors to say, yeah, unable to contact FileMaker host or whatever, or
Yeah. Okay. That's a good idea. You're right. Probably don't need that because the whole point of the try catch is just to do something at the top and then let the rest of the code proceed if things check out. So I don't need, I'll leave it like this because I don't want to redo it all again. But this is my test of the data test. Oh, let's do FileMaker. test of data. So yeah, that's interesting because I hear now I'm realizing something important. The try catch will stop if there's an error. It'll end up in this catch block and then nothing else after it will run. Correct?
Correct. Nothing else within the try block will run.
Oh, but the
Anything that
rest
you
of the
write
code.
after the try block, it'll just continue on,
Okay,
which is what Gabe was saying in terms of it's a nice thing because it gracefully handles error. It doesn't prevent your application from running
that's right.
if you
Okay.
encounter an error.
Yeah,
And
because if you imagine you could do the whole thing in just an if block. You just you have a set a variable requesting from FileMaker, and then you have an if, and you can check the result. Does
sure,
it look like I want to? Is it is it empty or not null or whatever?
like
But the
this.
problem with
Yeah.
that is if JavaScript encounters a syntax error or unexpected end of file, or all those errors that would do it, doing it in the try catch allows the rest of the JavaScript to run, and that's the key difference between using try catch and just putting it in an if statement. Because if it's in an if statement and you try and read a property that's not there, then JavaScript's going to fail, and the rest of the code will stop execution.
The the problem I see with all this is that if this runs with the error, the rest of my code is trying to load the data tables library or trying to render it. And if the data fails, then that thing can't render. Although data tables can render without data, it would just have an empty array and that would be okay. So that's probably a good use case for that is you try your data, you see if it's what you want it to be, an array in this case. If it is an array, then that's great. And then you fill the variable that will be used in the data tables with the data. If there's an error, if the data that comes in from FileMaker is not an array, is a number or is empty, is a string, then you catch that error. You let them, you just gracefully catch it, as you said. You still render the table, but in that case, then the data error, the data variable is empty, an empty array, and it becomes there's no crashing of the web viewer. The data table library will still render. I think that's correct. I think that's how you do it. In React, if a component doesn't have the right data it needs, you can just return that thing. You can return it and you can not render an entire component because the data that it needs is not available. That's really nice. We have a little bit different options here, but I like this. I like testing my data now. I think let me just put it back and just take a look. So we'll put it back up here. We'll get rid of this. Do that. Actually, I'll just try to undo a bunch of stuff because I want to get back to what I think is the better way to go. I should have saved it. I should have committed it. I almost never commit things. All right, keep on going.
That's what Command Z is for.
Yep.
It's in there somewhere.
All right. So this is what we have. The data tables would render down here and everything would be okay with empty data. That's not a problem.
But what you could do in that instance, and that's the use case of the final, is to say, well, if I didn't get any data, don't load the data script, don't load the library, or then do another call that if you're going to load something, get that, and then do something else, then you can put that inside of the final lease, so it only ever gets executed if that first thing was successful. If you want to get the dates and the quarters from this call, and then if we've received those, then query some data for those time periods, so you can have it done that way. So it just doesn't then, if it didn't get a valid date range, then don't then do a second call to get the data for those.
Let's try this. So here's an interesting thought. I actually don't know what this produces here. Oh gosh, it just goes out all the time. You all want to see my beautiful face, so I got to make it happen. There we go. Okay. Get to see my messier side of my office. So here I want to test for the type of. I think this is important and it's stuff that I have not done and that FileMaker kind of gives us, I think, but it's very important here to try to do. What is this? Let's see what this logs. I assume it logs true. So I'm passing an array in. Yep. Uh-oh. Oh, it's an object, actually. Sorry, it's an object. No, it's not. Type of data. What is,
Yeah,
let's just,
it is an object.
It's an object. It's an object with an array, is it not?
yeah, it is an
Yeah.
object. Okay. Why is
Does
that
it
right?
does it come where if there's only one result, it's an object, or if it's more than one, it's an array of objects? I don't know.
We'll look at type of in a minute. So console log type of data. It says it's an object, but that is not right. Let's try type of
But if you look at
object.
the actual data, that is an object. If you look at what gets logged on the left, that is an object on the left hand side.
So let's do that. Type of data. We'll do a console log of the data. It's an array. Why is it telling me it's an object? Because it's just an object? Let's see. Type of. I don't even know what type of it
FileMaker is an object. There's no array there.
Yeah, there's no array. Yeah.
Maybe it's. Oh, we don't have.
But
Yeah, okay. We don't have an array. We don't have an array type.
Right. It's either string or object or
Number.
number, null.
So let's ask
What?
some ChatGPT. Nope, no Googling. ChatGPT only. I hear someone Googling.
Oh,
Nope, don't tell us.
I've looked at the documentation, but yes, it's because
Oh,
because
array dot is array. I knew that.
Array.
yeah, right, that is array because in JavaScript an array is a type of object, which is confusing.
It makes so much sense.
Well, yeah.
Okay. So let's do this.
Everything's just at the end of the day, everything's a string. That's what I think.
Array.
Right.
We want to do dot is array data. Okay, that's all I want to do. Because I want to see if that causes an error. Or well, false is not an error. Right? False is not an error.
Correct. If you tried to map on an object, then that would throw an error, right?
All right.
But
so let's see what
if you're just testing that,
I want to throw an error if the data dot variable doesn't contain an array. Oh, throw new error. Okay. So we can actually throw an error. We can actually
You can define your own errors.
yeah, I'm good at defining my own errors. Do that in my personal
sounds
life.
like a t-shirt I should be
It's
wearing.
a lifestyle choice, isn't it?
It's a lifestyle choice. I'm really good at that, I must say. Okay, let's see what happens here. So if I run it, it's still going to be okay because what I'm passing in is an array. But if I do this and I say data, well, let's just do this. We'll
Can you
comment this.
do array not or like not is array? Array dot. Can you test for the not array
Uh,
scenario?
I don't know.
Exclamation mark before the array is array.
Yeah.
Let's see what this does. I don't know. I mean, oh yeah, it's already doing it.
It
Yeah.
already has it there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's already doing it.
Okay, good. So
Interrobang.
we threw an error. we threw an error, and that caused the catch part to run. So
Correct.
if not array dot is array data, the data that comes in is a number. We'll just do console.log type of data. So we'll run that. Number data is not array. So we throw an error and then it goes down to here. That's great. Great. I like that we can throw our own error. Great, cool. So this is how I should test it. And like I said in the at the beginning, I put a post about that ChatGPT helped me write. I'm not doing any try catches here. I'm assuming that the data is coming in. I'm just checking on its type. What type is it that is being sent in from FileMaker? In this case, it's a progress bar. I need to pass in a number, but I could pass it in as an object where data is its property, or I could just pass it in as a number itself, or I could pass it in as a string. So this was it's doing the lets and all that stuff. So this was my checking of the data type coming in. So it feels like I need to do this more. The more I talk about it with you all, the more I feel like I need to do this. It's more
And
complex.
also error is a class, so you can add your own functions to it, and you can define the errors have type of errors, and you can pass rich data into them if they're used extensively.
So error is a class because it's got a capital. Well, we can see that because it's got the capital E, right? Script error class.
Because that's kind of what happens when you get like a syntax error where you can pass it like what line it is and what file it's part of, and
so it's an object that has error dot is error, so we can see if it's an error. Can we error cause indicating the reason why the current error is thrown? Interesting. Error dot cause. Oh, we're passing in an object there. So we're passing in a message and then we're giving it some options.
Yeah, if you imagine like a large application, you want to be able to have people to be able to test things thoroughly against there. You want to be able to then say, right, well, we've got a car needs to have 4 wheels, and if it doesn't have 4 wheels, then throw a custom error that then says incorrect number of wheels or whatever like that, so you can extend the language ones that when you then call a function that in a try catch, you can then have it pass more verbose errors to someone writing code against your application or API.
This is what I use. This is what I'm starting to use AI for more, is to help me suggest any changes that it might want to make. See what it comes up with.
Please tidy up after me.
Yeah. All right, let's see what it did. So it removed the unused import, removed the unused button, initialize the table variable to null. Okay, so apparently AI doesn't like just to leave a variable declared without initializing it. Remove, add a check to ensure that data array is not empty before accessing the data 0. So where is that? Oh, data.length equals 0, received an empty array, else. Okay. This is interesting. I like it. I like it. So what do you think, guys? What do you think, everyone? Do you think that we should build into the development environment and into the course and into just general FileMaker training for JavaScript development, JavaScript training for FileMaker development. Should we build in this try catch idea or this testing of the data idea?
I think
Yes.
Yes.
I would say yes for anything of medium to extensive complexity. I think for simplicity, I think it adds more JavaScript code that newer people may not be familiar with. They see the words try and catch. You know, if you've not
Yep.
come across that syntax before, and it is fairly obvious, but it's not necessarily super simple what's happening there because it's a different logical flow. So I don't know if you should include it in the default build or not. That's probably a different question because the more stuff you put in that people don't know is, yes, you can see what that code is and find it out, but is it solving a problem that is inherent, and it's kind of a nicer way of handling problems, but it doesn't necessarily provide you much that doing it the standard way and just looking at the
Yeah.
look at the error in the web inspector, which tells you what's happened, which is wrong, which is the way most of us work. So I don't know.
I mean, I don't disagree, Gabe. I think making the environment accessible is super important. I also, though, think that there's point counterpoint. This is also a learning tool, and setting up good basic patterns, I think, is important too, right? And having a try catch is a nice pattern in that it doesn't kill your app. The widget will still load because it's been built in that way so that you'll at least get a result. You won't get a blank screen. And teaching people from the beginning to understand this pattern might have some value as well.
What does this mean if I do add it, does this mean that everything that I build in here, everything that I build for the widget, including rendering the library, updating its options, that all needs to be within the try block, right? Or because that's the way to catch any error for any part of my widget. But if I'm only checking the data, there still could be thousands of other problems. So I'm just wondering if everything now has to, not only do they have to be in the load widget function, but they have to be within this try block. That may not be a big problem.
Couldn't you have this as a subscript to check for the array, or to just create an error handling subscript
Yep.
that you can call anytime
Yep.
that just says we're looking for an array. We want to make sure it's an array before we continue, and that could handle
Yeah,
it. You can use that in multiple places, multiple files.
Yep.
because I always think of the try catch as a thing that's useful for when the file is running in production rather than a development aid. Because if you get an error, you're going to get an error on the console, and you need to have a look at that and find out what that is. The try catch doesn't really make any difference if you've captured that or it's just thrown an error and it's told you problem on line 157. It's more a resilience feature for when something's running in a live environment, and you want things to be able to fail gracefully without the rest of the code doing that. For me, that's where I see it as a difference. It's a bit like wrapping everything in a transaction and doing an on commit error check, where it's not really about speeding up the development. It's about making sure that the stuff that happens or either happens altogether or doesn't, which is kind of what the try catch.
I'm asking ChatGPT or whatever I'm using, Gemini. I don't know. I don't care. It's all the same thing. Oh no, I don't want you to do it. I'm asking, would you do it?
It's not very good at those kind of questions.
It doesn't like yes, no kind of.
All right. Well, then forget that.
Just wants to do it. It just don't matter if it's the right thing to do.
Is this a smart idea to do? It almost always says yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really not. You got to
Okay.
get really tricky with
Yeah,
how you
yeah.
ask things.
What
That's
is best
actually when I
practice?
tend to pull open the ChatGPT app and ask it in the app because the app can't write code. Well, it can write code, but it can't actually execute the code in VS Code. So I know my code is safe. I'm like, no, no, no. Just is this a standard practice? Is this the way people typically do this? Um,
Yeah, it's interesting that if you ask, is method X the standard way of doing it, is it always gives you a different answer from what is the standard way of doing X, because
right.
you're feeding in the name, it will always then look for things where that's referenced, and where it's referenced is more likely to be yes, it's used, so it's always drawn towards that, isn't it? Rather than saying
Yeah.
what are the what is the JavaScript best practice to capture errors,
Yeah, and you probably want to ask
rather
a
than is
thinking
try
model.
catch. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to ask a thinking model as well because a thinking will iterate and not just spit out the first response it gets. It'll say, okay,
Yeah.
is that true? Should I do that? Um, you probably get a wiser response.
It just told me there's no single best way. It depends on context, complexity, desired code structure. So what we were saying.
Makes
So
sense.
Kyle had the idea of moving it to a separate block that would work for separate things for, and I think we talked about this point before you got here is if you're going to use it more than once, then you can throw it into a separate function.
Yeah.
Um, the cons, of course, require passing necessary variables. So, well,
Yeah, and
fun.
that's all, and that's always the downside is the more of that kind of scaffolding code you add, it adds complexity and you're passing things around that it does
Yep.
then make, it can then make debugging or going back to it later difficult because it's abstracted out. That's always the balance between these things, isn't it? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
make it nice and dry and have it all separate, and then you're like, what? This is an instance of that, which is inherits from a type from this, and is called over there, and has this custom has these bits over here that happen in this other file. What on earth is going on here? Rather than, you just got a nice terse, 100
Yeah.
lines of code, rather than you've got,
Creates a lot
30.
of tension.
Well, and Gabe, this comment may more reflect my coding ability than anything, but I am finding like when I get a complex FileMaker script, even one that's poorly written, is easier to suss out than a complex JavaScript project, man. Like tracing what it uses through all the different oh
Yeah,
my word.
yeah.
Yeah.
You get above 10, 15 components and it's just gong show.
Because then even when you go into like right, okay, you go to the function name and you go right click and say where's this defined, and like VS
Yeah,
Code
yeah,
will
yeah.
jump to, but you still like you still when you could do that like once or twice. Once you're three levels deep on something, it just the complexity
Well,
just
I'm going to go to
kind
the
of go.
hook and then I'm going to go to the service and then I'm going to go to the API call. I'm like, oh my God, dude.
Yeah. I often handle this in the FileMaker script to, validate the JSON and what type of the JSON it is before I actually load it
Send it into the widget.
ahead of time. Yeah.
That's great. That's a great
Because
place
it's
to do it
just a
because,
couple lines in FileMaker, but it's a lot of lines in JavaScript.
yeah, if
I do
if this
wish that FileMaker had more inherent testing ability in it. I'm going through this right now with one of my customers where they want to move their literally 150 SMTP calls to an HTML call, and it's multiple subscripts on each script. It's just a freaking nightmare. But um, testing that and saying, okay, this works, setting up a context, saying, run the flow, make sure it works, don't affect my data. I just want to know, does this work? Not a concept in FileMaker, right? And
yeah.
yeah,
hmm
Well, that's a great point. We should, since we know FileMaker, we could probably test it over there before we send it into the web viewer. Um, that's a good place to do it. So, but this was a fun experiment. I asked it to add some comments, and there's more comments
Yeah,
than
Turn
it's
it into
yeah.
interesting.
a novel
AI
here.
loves comments.
Wrote a novel.
it did. It doubled the size of this. So,